And now it is my pleasure to officially introduce Jasmine Watkins from Auros Knowledge Systems to take us through the knowledge-aware approach and lessons learned. Welcome, Jasmine.
I got this feeling.
Hello. Can you hear me?
My bones. It goes electric.
Can you hear me on this? Am I projecting? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming and attending the Knowledge Aware Conference in 2023. This is my first in-person conference, so I'm feeling a little excited and everything to get to know new faces and some familiar faces and everything. So we're going to go ahead and start the advanced breakout sessions with the acknowledging the knowledge-aware approach to lessons learned capture. Today's agenda, we're going to simply ask what the question is. What is a lesson learned? We'll look over the definitions of that.
There you go.
Oh, it's not on yet?
Just hold it close to your mouth. That's perfect.
Okay.
Mike, yep.
But when I click it, it's not going to, oh. Okay, there may be a delay. My apologies. So the agenda today, we'll ask the question, what is a lesson learned, and go over the definitions of what that lesson is, or what those lessons learned definitions are. We'll go over the traditional approach of capturing lessons learned and compare that to the knowledge-aware approach of capturing lessons learned. Then we'll go over the knowledge-aware lessons learned maturity model. This resource will be useful to you all to identify where exactly your current process is, your current lessons learned capture process, and be able to identify how your current process can mature to the next level. And then at the end of all of that, all of me talking, because I will be talking a lot, we'll have a quick demonstration to show how the knowledge-aware approach of capturing lessons learned looks in Auros. So as I was putting the presentation together, I was coming across a lot of different resources, and I came across this quote that I found in a technical report written by a NASA engineer back in '92. But the quote kind of encapsulates still the issues that engineering organizations face right now. And the quote reads, "These reports are based on 3 perspectives: 51L Space Shuttle Challenger accident investigation, safe return of the shuttle to flight activities and the continuing flights, and 35 years of engineering experience. The general finding upon which the report is based is that failure, problems in general, were not due to undiscovered or missing theory, but to the neglect or oversight of basic principles. These oversights are in management, criteria, procedures, philosophy, test, analysis, communication and documentation, and project management areas of a program." And I felt that the quote was representative of the kind of oversights that we as engineers come across day in and day out. It's still come across day in and day out since the creation of this quote. And I felt that if we are able to highlight what exactly those downfalls are, we can use the knowledge-aware lessons learned capture approach to make better use of what is found, make better use of our existing principles, and put them to use in our existing process and make those better. So what is a lesson learned? A lesson learned is a documented positive or negative observation or experience in a project. One of the things that I do want to highlight on that first post is I see a lot of, in my own experience as well, when capturing lessons learned, we always want to focus on the failure points. What went wrong? What is the bad of the outcome of the lesson that we learned? And there's not a lot of the positives that are captured. And those are still good, useful things that we need to capture along in the process. What went well, and what can we learn from what went well? And how can we apply what went well to the existing process and future processes? Capturing lessons learned is an organization's commitment to running time and cost-efficient processes, and they provide cross-functional opportunities to learn from others within an organization. Sometimes those lessons learned are some organizations' only time to break the silos and understand how existing lessons learned in different segments of the process are affecting them or could affect them. And having cross-functional learning sessions allows for the process to get even stronger and get even better as you're moving through. So how do we know when a lesson has been learned? When managers are consistently reinforcing the organization's lesson learn process in the business, we can continue to enforce that those lessons that are learned as part of the process are being managed on a consistent basis and being put back into the process as part of the existing process. When those managers also implement tools to help reinforce the existing lesson learn process, that allows for those lessons to be learned as we go forward. When lessons are learned also when they're reused in new projects, and the how they're reused is perfected. So your existing lessons learned process, introducing knowledge-aware concepts into that knowledge, into your existing lessons learned process, and getting good and practicing essentially with that new knowledge-aware process is how the lessons will eventually get learned. But it is a journey to get to that point. Lessons are learned when there's a retrospective analysis that is done in line of the learning of the lesson learned process. So whenever we're going through our lessons learned process and we have access to what has been done in the past, we're able to bring forth insights on how we can improve that existing lesson. How can we implement it into the current workflow that was found in, and how that lesson can be implemented in future use based off of how it was used in the past. And then, of course, lessons are ultimately learned when there's a culture shift, when there's mind frames that are changed. And that takes time, but the reward at the end of that is extremely rewarding. So according to the Project Management Institute's definition of the traditional lessons learned approach, a lesson learned is identified, captured in a way, and documented. Once that lesson has been identified and documented, there's some sort of analysis process that is underdone where there's instruction on where it needs to be put thereafter. That lesson learned is then stored, and then somewhere down the line there's some sort of a trigger, or somebody knows to retrieve that lesson to put it back into your development process. However, with the traditional lessons learned approach, there are some downfalls. There are some areas in the process where things can get dropped. And it doesn't always happen at the retrieval step. Sometimes it happens at the identification step. So some of those downfalls are as follows. We've got knowledge that's difficult to find. That could be in multiple repositories. It could be folders that only certain people have access to. Knowledge is also, whenever the traditional approach is not working and knowledge is lacking relevance to the reuser, we know that the lesson learned process is not working and not effective. Whenever knowledge is not up to date, we know that the lessons learned approach is not being effective as well. Documented knowledge is incomplete. Knowledge is not actionable. That bullet point is super important because a lot of people think, well, I've captured the lesson. We need to change this part. Okay, where's the how? What are the actionable steps? What are the standard work associated with getting this lesson learned from being identified and documented to getting through analysis and stored and then ultimately retrieved back into the process? And then also the knowledge lacks end users' trust. There have been a lot of times where, even in my own personal experience, where we've gone back to access lessons learned, and there have been questions on who did this, who approved this, where are the comments on where this needs to go, all of those things. And how can we trust a process that we've already gone through, and at the end, we still don't know if it's usable data to put back into the process. Some of the things that we do not want to keep in mind when we are generating lessons learned as part of our development process is recording lessons learned without fully understanding the root cause. What exactly went wrong with the lesson that we've identified? Has it been captured? Those things we do not want to do when we are capturing lessons learned, is not fully understand what's going on. We don't want to create lessons learned that are not actionable, as said before. We don't want to dump all of our lessons learned in a bucket repository full of a whole bunch of document types. We don't want to require people to go search for lessons learned. That wastes time. That's not effective or efficient of getting things done. And we don't want to design the process around capturing lessons learned without knowing what we're going to do with that lesson after the fact. And that's what happens a lot of the time, is we're capturing things, we're putting them into a repository, but are we following through with our lessons learned reviews? Are we following through with the certain checkpoints in our product development process and making sure that they are being reintroduced? We have to keep those things in hindsight and make sure that our entire process is accountable. So the knowledge-aware lessons learned approach does everything that the traditional approach does, but in a way more effective and a way more comprehensive way that includes the retrieval of that knowledge back into your process. The knowledge-aware approach, there's no need to emphasize the storage step. What is created in Auros is saved in Auros, so you never lose your footprint of what you're doing in the system. The retrieve step is incorporated as part of your lessons learned process and ultimately a part of your design process, so that you're not missing things that are going through, you're not missing anything that is being captured, you're not missing anything that's going through an analysis process through the promotion step, and you are also actively looking across or reading across to older information that can give you more insight, and you can get a better view of what this or how this lesson learned needs to be applied. What we do want to do when we are capturing lessons learned is create actionable lessons around that the lesson that's been captured. We want to use consistent structure of formatting when documenting lessons learned. So we have a main asset, for example, in Auros, there'll be a main asset or configurable template that you can capture your lessons learned information in. We want to understand where lessons learned need to be deployed. So after we've captured the lesson, where does it need to go? Do we have a good understanding of the lesson that has been captured and who needs to be informed of it? We need to be mindful of distributing the lesson learned into the flow of work thereafter. And two important bullet points that are kind of a forethought when creating lessons learned is understanding how and tracking how the lesson is being used in current workflows and in new workflows, and maybe even building metrics around that. Maybe in the past with previous tools may not have had that capability, but with Auros that capability is there. And also the managing of the obsolescence of lessons learned. And sometimes after a period of time, identified lessons are no longer applicable. And knowing when we need to go back in and delete or update even is something that's kind of put on the back burner, aside from creating. But with some of the features and tools built into Auros, we are able to kind of track that obsolescence as well through vitality. There's a lot of different things in the tool that we can use to track that and not have it in hindsight. So how does the knowledge-aware process look in Auros, for example, in Auros IQ when it comes to these 4 steps? The first step in the knowledge-aware lessons learned approach is identification. And in this step, we're capturing the event whether that is a problem or a success, and we're identifying the root cause in that event and capturing it in either best practices for the knowledge-aware approach, either an issue or utilizing an assessment control to capture that lesson learned. After the lesson has been captured in either one of those assets, the resulting asset that we are going to be working with to promote and analyze thereafter is a KPAC. And through the promotion process and pushing the KPAC or promoting the KPAC through change management, we're able to analyze in our change management process. We're able to define that lesson and further refine it for its use in the current workflow. So if you have reviewers as part of your change management process, or if just have your approver team as part of your change management process, that's where you would go to capture, analyze, and once all of that information has been refined at the end of the change management process, you should have an active KPAC. Once you have this active KPAC, this active lesson learned KPAC in your lesson learned community, now the next step is to read across and use that KPAC to read across in other assessment controls or in existing assessment controls to determine if that lesson needs to be applied, if it needs to not be applied, or if it's in process of being applied. And in our lesson learned community, using assessment controls and analyzing these lesson learned KPACs, we're able to make those determinations and further determine if this lesson learned will be applicable to the product at hand. After we have determined if that lesson learned KPAC is applicable to the lesson learned process, furthermore the design process, and it has been reintroduced into current workflows, then we can further disseminate those new lesson learned KPACs into new workflows, new projects after the fact. And we can carry forward that information and insight into new projects. And so lastly, before we get into the visual demonstration, this is an explanation or our knowledge-aware lessons learned maturity model resource. And this is the tool that you can use to identify where your current lesson learned process is. Are you closer to capture-centric, where you're identifying the information, capturing it, but it's kind of just staying in its place until somebody is identified to go look at it? Or are you further along in the process, maybe have a couple of organized points or enterprise library points? You could have a mix or your process could fit in multiple categories. But ultimately, wherever your process majority lies, we've got a framework or insight into a framework to start moving you to a more mature knowledge-aware process. Something that allows for the lessons that are identified in your design reviews, in your product development processes, allowing for that to be more on a reuse-centric focus and not be so capture-heavy and people-dependent. So now we have a quick cool cup process demonstration. In this demonstration, we are identifying an 8D issue, and I'm going to give a little bit of background before I press play on the demonstration. So in this, demonstration, we are manufacturing a cup. There's an 8D issue that we have to go into Auros and identify, or go into Auros and look up so that we can put it through the knowledge-aware process or knowledge-aware approach. We're going to, firstly, the 8D issue is, or has been identified as there's an inner and outer separation of two pieces of the cup due to weld failures. And the root cause of that weld failure ended up being that the welding that was being performed in the weld booth, humidity was exceeding 50% and causing the weld joints to not be well attached or well put together. So here we're going to go ahead and start the demonstration, and we're going to go into Auros and ID or look up our 8D issue. You can access your issues through the Issue Smart tile or through the My Dashboard icon. We do prefer accessing your work through the My Dashboard. All of your assessments and issues that are tailored or identified to you will be searchable here. Under the Issues tab, we are going to ID or click on the 8D issue for the BevMax project, and then we'll expand it or undock the issue so that we can identify and look at all of the content. Here, like I said before in the preface to the demonstration, we've captured the issue, we've captured the root cause as an element on the issue, and now we need to introduce this issue back into our design process or our lessons learned process. And so now we're going to promote the issue by pushing it into a KPAC or creating a KPAC. So clicking the three dots in the top right corner of the issue and then clicking Create KPAC will turn this issue into a KPAC. You would identify the COP that you want to push the KPAC into. We've identified our lessons learned community as that community, and we're assigning a lessons learned KPAC type. Here we're mapping our issue elements to our KPAC elements, and the idea here is not to match word for word or element for element, but really where the issue information needs to be mapped to the KPAC elements. For instance, our KPAC title will be the corrective action element on the issue. Once we've done mapping all of our elements, we create the KPAC. The KPAC's in edit form, and now it can be saved to review ready as part of the change management process in that community of practice. So now the reviewer will go and identify that lesson learned KPAC under the change control section in the navigation panel. Clicking on the KPAC will open up the KPAC and review ready. We've already got some review comments identified. So after those review comments have been identified, the reviewer will move the KPAC to approval status so that the approvers can go in and they can start inputting their feedback. They'll go back into the same COP, open up that KPAC from the navigation drawer under approvals. They'll go in to input their response, approve or reject. Clicking proceed will allow for them to put in their comments and capture anything that needs to be refined, defined, or anything like that, or their acceptance criteria or acceptance comments. And then once that approver has given their approval, they'll save the KPAC to active status. So now we have an active lesson learned KPAC in our lesson learned community that we can now analyze in a read across assessment control in that community and determine if we're going to implement this lesson learned into our existing design process. So now in that community, we're going to create a lesson read across assessment, but right now we're creating it for the 2024 Buzz Cup program. They have a scheduled lesson learned review, and so as part of that, they are completing the header to start that review as part of their Gate 3 deliverables for the following part. Once they create this assessment, that lesson learned review, they want to pull in all lessons learned pulled in or created for acrylic cylinder, since that criteria also applies to their program as well. The evaluator will work down the assessment line item by line item and determine if that lesson learned should be applied to the current program. If it is applied, they'll put their comments in the explanation field and move on to the next to determine if that lesson learned needs to be applied into their program. And the evaluator will continue to work down line item by line item. So in addition to all the existing lesson learned that were pulled into this assessment, we have the newly created one as well. And now at the bottom of the assessment, we can assign it an in-process conformance state, since we are in the process of determining whether or not it needs to be used into the, needs to be reincorporated back into the design process. And so this lesson learned read across assessment will stay open for until all lessons learned have been identified for the process. But the original 8D issue was found against the BevMax project. So if we were to go and open up our existing lesson read across assessment for that project, we would see, oh, we have a requery icon showing at the very top. That indicates that based off of the criteria that we've already previously defined for this assessment, this KPAC needs to be brought into the assessment now for evaluation. And now we can determine if the new lessons learned will apply or should be applied to the BevMax program. Using the look across icon underneath the KPACs in your assessment, you can see how existing lessons learned have been filled out for previous programs and gather more insight. So the last step is dissemination. That step is covered in the design review process presentation from Jo Beth. And I guess that's all I have from here. Do we have any questions?
So my question is about the issue. When you create a KPAC from an issue, and you say you have some specific elements, so is this a standard menu in Auros? I have, for example, now lesson learned in my programs, but I created manually KPACs from them. So how do we create this automatic process when an issue became a KPAC, pulling the required elements?
So that process isn't automatic, but you have the capability of creating a KPAC directly from your issue through the three dots in the menu. As soon as you click those three dots, you click Create KPAC, and then you manually map your elements from your issue to your KPAC. And you decide where you want that information from your issue to go to your KPAC. So it's not a manual or an automatic process. It's a manual one, but you have autonomy of how you want that information mapped from one asset to the next.
And one more thing, if your elements are named the same, they'll automatically have each other.
Okay, so same elements will be automatically transferred. When you create the assessments, will the KPACs have lesson learned somewhere in the field? So you know that assessment is created with all the lessons learned from previous projects?
You would create that in your COP, in your community of practice. So the naming of your community or the name of your KPAC and everything like that, that would be something that you would name yourself. But as far as content in the KPAC or that would all be determined by you and your group.
Yeah, so I need a special designation to know that these are all KPACs originating from lesson learned.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they would originate from a different COP. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jasmine.
No problem.
My question is, most of the issues that I have had experience with that have led to 8D's corrective actions, they lead to a change in a current standard or a current process, not necessarily, we didn't have anything around this, we have to create something new. So I could see a situation where you might need to update existing KPACs, and maybe multiple ones. In your example, you might have a manufacturing standard around welding, you might have a product standard around welding, et cetera. So you might be in a position where you're trying to find a home for the corrective action that you found. How would you go through that and kind of assess the sea of KPACs that you have and try to find the ones that would apply to the change and get them updated quickly?
I would say that would be in reference to our other preferred way of capturing lessons learned. Instead of starting with an issue, you would start with an assessment control and be able to identify those KPACs. Steve, could you give some insight on exactly how those KPACs could be analyzed in the assessment control preferred way?
So one of the way you can to kind of look across and see what's out there, there's tools within the application called proximity search, so you can kind of see what's similar to that content. And that shows up as an icon at the bottom of the issue or the knowledge packet. It will say, if you're looking at this knowledge packet, it will say, hey, this issue is similar to this knowledge packet, or this knowledge packet is similar to this issue. Another way is when you're going through your problem solving or your root cause analysis is identifying tasks. And so you can task off to update certain knowledge packets if you happen to already be aware of it. If not, I would use either like a global quick search option or the proximity search option to find what's relevant to that lessons learned.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks to both of you. We got another one here.
So the creation of knowledge packets seems to be more manual, right? Is there a possibility if all our root cause analysis results or the lessons learned are in a specific format, all of them, can your system learn that format and automatically create the knowledge packets?
If that automation kind of ties into what Gabriella was kind of referencing, if you have similar elements between your issue and your KPAC, those elements will automatically map. So that you wouldn't have to manually go through and match all of that information. So if you did have all of your elements matching, one for one, as soon as you were to create KPAC, all of your elements would automatically map, and you could immediately click Create KPAC. But there's not and I hope I'm answering it in reference to how you're asking it, but when it comes to the manual part, if your elements are matching between the two assets, they should automatically map, and you wouldn't have to do that part.
There's actually a couple different ways to bulk import into the application. Kind of if you have a standard form like you've mentioned, there is a tool within the application called a document ingester. And that allows, it's basically a system that will read in that file, and then you tell the document ingester, the parsing queues, what you want that's important to your knowledge packet, and they can read in that information in bulk and create several knowledge packets at one time. Another way you could do it too is that you can map and you could use Excel. And so you can create Excel files to bulk import data and create knowledge packets into a community of practice.
Cool, thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh.
We're trying to, where does it go? Brian, where did the questions go online?
Is it this?
So about tribal knowledge, I was just wondering if you have any information, or if anybody does, in terms of getting people to actually do more of the lessons learned rather than tribal knowledge. For example, like I have a group with people who've been there 30, 40 years, and so they won't have time for that because they're too busy. But I'm just wondering if this is something where they're more willing to, if this system is fast enough or incorporates enough where they're actually going to see the positive in it and actually contribute to it rather than just relying on their tribal knowledge. That's the big cultural thing that I'm wondering, how do you get over that with lessons learned?
When seeing the evidence on how the reintroduction of that lesson learned back into the process and seeing if that reintroduction process cuts down on time or cuts down on the analysis process, those are the kind of evidences that can start to shift that culture, but I understand that is still a lengthy process and dependent on mindset and things like that. When it comes to, Steve, maybe you can get a little bit more insight, give a little bit more insight.
I guess what I'm looking for, is there any data that anybody has to kind of show, like, for example, if I go to my group and say, the way you've been doing it, traditional method, this methodology cuts it by 50%. or it cuts it from so much time so that they're more willing to put in that time now? Because before they just see it's this cumbersome activity.
I don't know if we have that type of evidence, empirical evidence available like that, but you can develop that through your own process. You can input or determine, if are these time-saving methods, are these cost-saving methods. You can use the tool to help you develop those kinds of analyses. But I don't know off the top of my head if we in business development or if marketing has the type of that type of evidence to give in reference to the lesson learned approach.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Tim from Caterpillar. Let me answer that a little bit. So what we do is we tend to, when it comes to knowledge capture, we tend to not allow those knowledge experts to actually do the capture. What we do is we have those that are maybe in that succession plan start doing the knowledge capture. And what's going to happen is that you're going to find that there's going to be gaps. And then what we do is then we schedule specific review times with those knowledge experts to help in that conversation with what's been written or whatever to review those things that maybe they find as being gaps. And that becomes part of their development plan. So what's interesting about that is that when you schedule these these in-person meetings, maybe once a month, once every 3 months, whatever you decide is important to you, depending on your team's time, what that allows is it allows interaction. It allows you to them to help oversee and understand, how the organization is growing technically. And yet you're not using their time, which is really valuable, right? I'll tell you, technical experts tend to get used quite a lot. And so we want to reduce that time where it makes sense to do so and not, consume their time if we can with knowledge-aware techniques.
And we found another online question. Thank you for prompting me to find them. They're under Ask a Question. So we've got one more.
This question comes from Tim. Like with 50% humidity, can the weld booth settings be connected within Auros so a real-time assessment can be driven from environmental controls? And I would say yes. If there are ways to connect Auros to through API connection to your applications or outside applications that are analyzing or designing your products. But I think that I would say yes. I would say that is definitely possible as long as the not REST API, but as long as the API connectivity is possible between that application and Auros, then yeah.
So do you have a list of those connectivity capabilities, C++? How do you have an open environment for that code to be exchanged?
Steve is our expert on API connectivity.
Yeah, so the API architecture is JAX-WS or REST connections. And they are available to anyone. Any customer of Auros has the ability to use those APIs to connect to any application that they see fit. As Jasmine mentioned, often you need the other application to also have web services to enable that connection between the two applications. But the whole architecture of Auros is built on this idea of knowledge as a service. So we want to be able to provide any application with the knowledge it needs to make smarter, better decisions.
And it could connect to robotic interfaces.
Absolutely. Robotic interfaces, manufacturing design processes, all those are up for consideration. And we may not have a out-of-the-box solution or off-the-shelf solution to it, but doesn't mean it can't be built.
All right, we're out of time for this session. Amazing participation as predicted. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Great stuff.